Hello everyone, my name is Sammy Woldeab and I'm an English instructor at the Toin University of Yokohama. I'm very happy and excited to be a part of the Teacher Journeys 2020 conference, and I hope that I can contribute something meaningful to other educators out there by discussing my own experiences in these very unique times. More specifically, I'll be talking about the strategies and mindset I had shifting from face-to-face teaching to online teaching, and the sustainable practices I attempted to build along the way. While the changeover to online teaching was necessary because of the circumstances, I think it gave quite a lot of us a push to not only learn new skills, but an opportunity to pause and reevaluate our teaching methods. For myself, I had absolutely zero experience teaching online prior to April of this year. I had heard of Zoom, but never had the need for it. Even so, I was confident, maybe sometimes even too confident, in my ability to figure things out as I went along. But that sense of fighting battles as I went along proved to be necessary in my own journey of developing these new skills and changing the way I teach. This new normal was scary but exciting, and maybe the push I was needing to approach the challenges I already faced from another angle. Just to give you a little bit of context, I work in a department at the university called the English Village alongside a team of diverse instructors, and the goal of this space is to provide an environment where students are exposed to English and other cultures in a natural setting. As part of this space, we also provide various programs to the affiliated elementary and secondary schools on campus, and the focus of my presentation will be on the extracurricular lessons given to elementary school students 3rd to 6th grade. These English lessons are usually conducted face-to-face for about 50 minutes with 20 students maximum per class. They're independent of the lessons provided at the school, the regular English lessons. So in other words, they are supplementary to what's being provided at the school. And the lessons themselves are geared more towards giving students opportunities to speak in English. So we focus on English communication rather than reading and writing, which they do at the school in the regular lessons. These lessons are also completely optional, and most parents sign their children up as a sort of club activity. Now, while this sounds like an opportunity to do a lot of fun and creative activities with students, there are a few challenges in the usual face-to-face format. The first challenge has to do with engagement. Because of the nature of this program and its timing and setting outside of the usual school environment, it's very difficult to convince students that these lessons are a part of the regular school day. By the time students arrive at these lessons, the regular school day has ended and they are ready to move on and go home. So while it's very important that we promote a relaxed environment, it's equally as important to have some sort of routine while engaging students in a way that they can learn something they might not have covered in their regular English lessons. The second challenge is related to class size and numbers. As I said earlier, the maximum number of students in one of these classes is about 20 students. While this is not really a large number compared to the regular classes, which can have double the amount of students, it's still quite a challenge to manage 20 students when they're all feeling as if the school day is already over. Some solutions that my colleagues and I have relied on regularly are seating charts and creation of teams. We also experimented with not having desks in the room to set it apart from the regular English lessons at the school, which seem a little bit more rigid in structure. So the creation of teams, using teams has proven in particular to be quite useful. In fact, we often keep track of points for each team that are earned through things like model behavior and participation in activities. One other area I'd like to address that is challenging is the wide range of levels and English abilities in one class. Students are usually sorted at random by the school, which means that one of our classes can have quite a range of backgrounds. If students find the content too difficult, they can become demotivated and unengaged. But on the other hand, a similar result can happen with students who don't find the material challenging enough. In creating teams that I mentioned earlier, I try to create teams that are well balanced in terms of levels, and one of the basic rules that we have at this after school program is the idea of working together and helping classmates when needed. By doing so, I want to show students that there's no shame in not knowing something and that we're all there to support each other. I know this sounds like some sort of ideal classroom filled with positivity, but it wasn't easy trying to get students to build that sense of community. In fact, the switch to online learning made this a little bit easier because of the reduced numbers per session, which made it easier for them to get to know each other better. So now I'd like to address the concerns that I had when transitioning to online learning. These concerns are by no means comprehensive. I had quite a lot of them alongside my colleagues, but I chose to focus on 3 of them for the purpose of this presentation. So I'd like to give a brief overview, and maybe in the comments section or at a later date in time, I'd like to hear from other educators about the challenges that they had when they were making that transition to online teaching. The first point I'd like to share is manageability. Some questions that related to that were, what is the practical number of students to have per Zoom session, and how long should one Zoom session be? The second point is engagement. How can we get students hooked and interested, especially when we're not there with them physically? And the third and final point has to do with sustainability, which is the focus of this presentation. How can these changes be incorporated into future practice in a meaningful way? So how can I use these new skills beyond this experience of teaching online? So say when we go back to face-to-face teaching, how can I incorporate what I've learned during this time in my own classroom? The first point, manageability, I'd like to talk a little bit in more detail about this. So in our face-to-face sessions, one session had 20 students and it was about 50 minutes per lesson. For the sake of online lessons, we figured that these parameters, I guess, would not work well online, especially the length, because it was already hard enough to hold students' attention for that amount of time in person. And for the number of students in a Zoom call, you don't really want to have 20 students in a lesson that wants to focus on English communication. There won't be much time for students to get to speak. So we decided to reduce the numbers. 5 students per Zoom session, with each session being 25 minutes in length. Now, what this did was give more students opportunities to speak in English and also get to know us better. And it also made the lessons much more concentrated and condensed, which was nice because we could get through a good amount of material, but it would stick to students' memories. So I can say this now confidently after teaching these students for about 10 weeks over the summer. This ended up working really well, and I'm glad that we decided to make these changes when transitioning to online teaching. I'd like to hear about what kind of changes that other teachers made when making that transition, especially when it comes to elementary school students, because many of these students, while we assume are literate with technology, it's really surprising to see that they might not be as literate as we thought, and technology especially learning online for them is a really foreign concept and might be the first time that they're doing it this year. So it was interesting to go on that journey with them. And yeah, I'd like to hear more about it from other teachers as well. The second point is about engagement. How can we get students hooked and interested? This is something that I've struggled with a lot when it comes to my own classes in a face-to-face environment. So most of my lessons, face-to-face and online, are conducted using PowerPoint. So I make PowerPoint slides for vocabulary, for target language. I try to incorporate videos and activities in there as well. So visual elements are very important, and my lessons are usually very visually heavy. The second point is a shared virtual space for learning. So online teaching and learning gave us a unique opportunity to welcome students into our homes and for them to welcome us into their homes, which is very rare. It hasn't happened up until now for me. So it was very important to create a sense of comfort between us. So ways that I encouraged this was, for example, encouraging more show and tell. So for example, if I were to do a lesson about furniture or stationery items at school, so for example, pencils, erasers, and so on, I would encourage students to show me what they had available around them. So they were using real items in their home to talk about them in English, or attempt to talk about them in English, which was really fun because a lot of the students brought their own hobbies into the lesson, which they don't usually get to do. And we also had a few students who encouraged their family members to join. So it really forged a sense of community amongst all of us. And the final point that I'd like to talk about is the inclusion of game-like elements. So this point in particular, I really tried to heavily incorporate into the PowerPoint. So in a face-to-face lesson, English lesson, I usually had games using physical cards and so on. But in this case, there was not really a way for me to do that. So I had to kind of change that to fit into an online environment. So I'd like to show you one example of a game-like element I incorporated in a lesson. This lesson was created for the 3rd grade, and the target language is I see. So the question would be, what do you see? And the students would have to use the phrase I see to identify some items. Most students are really familiar with a lot of items in English, but they struggle to use the target language to express that. So, for example, they would choose an item. Let's say the cat. All right, we would review what this was in English. Most of them got it, and then they would try to use it with the target language, I see. So the game-like elements in this are present in the fact that students go about this like a scavenger hunt. So I've put here in the corner, hint, there are 15 words. So they would try to identify all 15 words in this room. This ended up really being a big hit with the students because they could visualize everything within this virtual space or imaginary space, and they could see the vocabulary and target language come alive by getting to use them in this context. So the final point of this presentation has to do with sustainability. I really wanted to think about how to incorporate the changes into my future practice. So how to incorporate the new skills that I've gained by using technology. And I really wanted to focus on integrating technology into my practice. So using this new technology was not just a one-off thing. I wanted to use what I learned so that it didn't end up a waste. So when we eventually go back to face-to-face teaching, I want to use what I've learned to enhance student learning. So to really integrate technology into my own practice, I wanted to consult a model for integration of technology in education. This is one model that I came across actually fairly recently, and it was really interesting to think about my own experience in the scope of this model. So the Samura Model by Dr. Ruben Puentedura has 4 levels: the substitution level, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. And on the side, you can see there are 2 other categories: enhancement and transformation of learning. So transformation is a little bit more involved, and I haven't gotten to that stage of technology integration, but I think definitely I've enhanced my practice, and I've enhanced learning using both substitution and augmentation. So substitution simply means using technology as a direct substitute with no functional change. And augmentation would be using technology as a direct substitute, but with some improvement. So teaching using Zoom, of course, there are many different examples that I could pull up. So I want to show you one more example of a lesson that might model the augmentation level, so some functional improvement. Students in this class, the 5th grade, were learning about places. So for example, there's a hospital and there's a bakery. This would just be substitution of using flashcards, for example, in face-to-face lessons. However, I came across a website where you could use a wheel. It's called Wheel of Names, and I'll have the link later in the presentation. But I found that using a spinning wheel really helped students to feel the game-like element in that, and it became a lot easier to review vocabulary using this because it demanded that students were more involved in it than, for example, just showing flashcards again and again. So I thought that this was one way demonstrating augmentation using the Samura model. And another example was using the functions built into Zoom, actually, to review target language. So this particular target language was reviewing prepositions, just 2 of them, next to and in front of. And I would show students a picture and a statement, and I would ask them a question. And if they thought the answer was next to, they would hit the button for the thumbs up. If they thought the answer was in front of, they would hit the button for applause, the emoji for applause. So this is the example. The question is, where is the park? So the picture clearly shows the park next to the hair salon. So learning prepositions was a little bit of a challenge for the students, and they often felt very conscious of making a mistake. So I found that just hitting a button at first and getting familiar with the prepositions really made them feel more comfortable. And then when it came time to speak, they had a little bit more confidence than they usually did. So once they select their answer, I would reveal the answer, and then I would ask a student to read the statement after I've read it so that they can practice speaking. So I found this to be definitely a functional improvement of the way I would do it in a face-to-face session. And some other examples included this really cool website where you can create, I guess, manipulatives, like some cards that you can match. So in this case, I was using the places that we've learned and something that I wanted to do, and the students would have to match the statement with the place that I would have to go to do that action. if we go back to the model, I really think this is one of many great ways to think about how we can integrate technology into our own practice. And I would be interested to hear again how other teachers out there thought about the integration of technology in their own practices, and if there are any other interesting models that I could learn from. Finally, I'd just like to share some of the resources that I used in creating lessons. I think I've shown all of these in this presentation, so please go ahead and feel free to check these out when you're making your own lessons. And of course, I'd like to create a dialogue and share some resources as well. So if you have anything interesting again to share with me, I'm very open to it. I'd like to thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and I hope that you go away from this presentation with a few ideas for your own practice, and good luck to you all teaching online. I know it's been definitely a big challenge for me, but it's been interesting, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you for watching.